Welcome everyone to today's AI in Manufacturing webinar. My name is Sylvia Keane. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for the Confirm Research Centre. We're one of 16 SFI centres. We're based in the University of Limerick. So we're a Science Foundation Ireland Research Centre, specifically in the smart manufacturing space. Today, we will be co-hosting this webinar with Mark Kelly, part of AI Ireland. And we also have some lovely partners joining us as well today for our industry panel. So thank you to Dupuy, Analog Devices and Advanced Manufacturing Control Systems. And we also will be giving an overview of the AI Master's Programme in the University of Limerick as well. And we will have past and present students on that course. And we will also have Dr. Pep joining us as well, and Professor Barry O'Sullivan, who will also be our keynote speaker today. So without any further ado, I'll pass you over to Mark Kelly.
Sylvia, thank you very much for that. You're all very, very welcome to today's session. My name is Mark Kelly. I'm the founder of AI Ireland, a not-for-profit organisation, also the Chief Customer Officer at Aldus International. And in AI Ireland, we've been going nearly 3 years, and what we do is we showcase some of the applications of data science and AI in Ireland. We do that through our podcast series, meetups like this, and our AI awards. I got to meet Dr. Pepijn van der Ven, who's Department of Electronic and Computer Engineering and Health Research Institute, University of Limerick, over the last couple of years. And this year I interviewed him for our AI Ireland podcast. And in that, he gave an overview about how the part-time masters came about, the demand, how you were doing it remotely, some of the applications of it in the real world. And I also had the opportunity to interview some past and present students who had undertaken the course and to see their diverse background and what they were looking to do in the future. And we came together to talk about AI and manufacturing as a topic, as we felt that this is a huge opportunity for Ireland. And today we're going to hear more details about that. Before that, we're going to have Dr. Pepijn, and he's going to give an overview of the Masters in Artificial Intelligence program in the University of Limerick. Over to you, Dr. Pepijn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark. I'm just sharing my screen here. And if you could just confirm for me, please, that it's showing for you.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So welcome all to this session today. I'm very pleased to be here to talk about UL's online Masters in Artificial Intelligence. It maybe seems a little bit strange that this is at the start of the program, but I do think that education in this area is tremendously important for Ireland going forward in this space and industry going forward in this space. So what I would like to do is give you an overview of our Masters in AI in UL, which is completely online. But before I do that, I want to give you a very quick history. Now, it's a very incomplete history, but it will, I think, illustrate some of the things that we're also touching upon in the program. So if we're looking at the history of AI, it's actually quite old. So in the 1950s to the 1970s, we had kind of the first wave with the likes of Minsky and Rosenblatt. And what I'm showing over here is this surfboard in gray, shows that it was all still fairly simple affairs. People started thinking about something that already started looking like what we now call neural networks. And there was this same thing for integration, symbolic integration of equations. And natural language processing was already a topic at the time. So even though, of course, things were quite simple at that stage, they were already thinking about quite complex problems. And of course, chess, because we always, people like to play games. And of course, when AI became a thing, they started thinking, okay, can we use this for things like chess? So after this first wave, or in AI terms, in AI history terms, people also speak of the summers and the winters. So there was a winter where there was less interest. People thought that this whole AI thing was actually a little bit exaggerated. It wasn't really adding much. So people forgot about it a little bit, but then we got a second wave. So the surfboard has become quite colorful. We have some new people on the surfboard, and this is only a selection, of course, of people. And this was a really important time for AI, because this is where people started thinking about real neural networks. The VC theory by Vapnik and Chervonenkis is one of the theories that underlies the fact that, yes, we can show that we can learn from data, basically. That's largely what machine learning is, a part of AI, and things like backpropagation. And again, chess were very important. Now, of course, we find ourselves on the third wave in this massive speedboat, 2 massive outboard engines, really powerful. And instead of academia, all these companies on board, and things really seem to have taken off. One of the typical things now is these really big networks that are driving a lot of the innovation. And again, chess is playing a role. Now, you may think that the red thread through this, that the story here is chess. Now, that is one of the stories, but the more important story is this network over here, that from very small and very simple linear models became nonlinear and then massive. That's a really important aspect. So these neural networks, and these deep neural networks, as we call them, they have really been driving the advance in AI. But the other thing to notice, and that is important, is that we've had those winters. So we've had 2 winters so far, but the question is, when is this current period going to stop, or is it going to stop? So to be able to manage that, I think it's very important that we use AI right. And as a big part of that, of course, is to educate ourselves correctly around AI, so that we can use AI properly, but also so that we can use AI ethically. And we have Professor Barry O'Sullivan on the call today. And of course, he's one of our experts, the European experts on ethics AI. So I'm sure that he can tell us more about the ethical aspects of AI and how important it is. So in terms of the program, why would you choose UL? Well, one of the first reasons is that the UL program is completely industry driven. We have an industry board who has decided what should be on the program. We're the largest program, but yet it's very personal. It's a very personal and engaging program, and that's largely due to the way we have incorporated the program. It's fully online, including all the exams. So this is tailored for all of you out there in industry. Every module on the program was specifically designed for this program. And that's something that I'm very proud of, because that doesn't happen often. And also it was tailor-made for online delivery. And that's really important. And this goes back to the engaging aspect of the program. You can only do that if you tailor design for online delivery. Now, just to give you an idea of the types of research that we're doing, and of course, that's also important already as part of the masters, but also for further engagement with UL. So we have AI research in various areas. So health, finance, ICT, and Industry 4.0 are big areas. And just to give you a few sample programs, this is one for myself. I do a lot around health and mental health. So in this project, we're trying to predict depression treatment outcomes using AI. We have a project on breast cancer detection from Professor Conor Ryan in CSIS. We also, and I think this is very interesting, have projects around liability, legal and ethical aspects in AI, in this case around autonomous cars. Of course, Confirm is very interested in digital twins, and AI has a huge role to play there in terms of providing advanced data analytics to make these digital twins as appropriate as possible to model the processes, the industrial processes that they want to model. And the last addition to this, and I'm very pleased with this project. This is a project that I'm involved with as well, is on machine vision for the circular economy with the company AMCS. And today we have Lasse Yiborn on the call as well. Okay, so a little bit more about the program structure. As you would expect from a master's, it's a 90-credit program, 2 years fully online. Like I said, all modules are created specifically for the program. We have flexible 2-week cycles, which have shown to suit our learners who learn generally in groups of 15. And again, this is really important because this allows you to really engage with each other. And the engagement is moderated by module leaders and moderators. And predominantly, and this is also important, continuous assessment rather than end of semester exams. And all this coursework online. And over here, you see a quick overview of our 5 semesters, which are generally 14 to 15 weeks long. Okay, what should you expect if you were to partake? In year 1, we really lay the foundations for your knowledge in AI and the associated mathematics and coding. but we will also explore really AI already. So it's not just the dry stuff to get you prepped for the really interesting stuff. We dive in straight away. We do that with 6 modules. In the autumn, you do 2 modules, which are about building your basic skills in Python and maths, but also to show you the other side of it, the really exciting deep learning type applications. And at the end of this semester, you will get a level 9 certificate in AI. So at this stage, you can actually gracefully leave the program if you think this is enough for me. And some people do that. Most people continue, but some people do that. So if you do continue, the rest of that year, the spring and the summer, is more modules around the basics of AI, and we're looking at visualization of data, data exploration, also some theory behind AI that then informs a lot of the more practical stuff. And then towards the summer, we start looking at advanced topics, which then inform your research project. And we have a dedicated module on ethics in AI. And that's a really important aspect of the program and of AI in general. In year 2, you have 4 more modules, which are more application focused. So we have a machine learning applications module where you're looking at natural language processing and probabilistic methods and machine vision. And then in the last semester, you start looking at data science and AI ecosystems and deep learning, including a bit of the exciting area of reinforcement learning. And then finally, all that is left is the dissertation. Now, that's still a good body of work, of course, but very worthwhile doing. Okay, what does a typical module look like? I've been talking about this whole idea of doing things online. And for this, we use a paradigm called Etivities, which came floating over from Australia, Western Australia. And in Etivities, you're always working around a certain topic. And there's a clear purpose to what you're doing. And that purpose then feeds into a task that you have to perform as a student. Once you've done that task, you will post about this in a forum. And then once you've posted, you will respond to others and others will respond to you. As a result, we get absolutely fantastic group work and group engagement. And there's tremendous learning in this. But of course, we support that learning with books, with online resources, and with lectures as necessary. And the last part of this, and this is really important, and this is one of the things that we really enforce with these activities, is the reflection, where you really cement the learning that you have done within that particular activity. Types of topics that you may expect are first, and this is in the first semester, of course, around linear algebra, calculus, and probability theory, just to get the background or to refresh the background in many cases. Then in the first spring semester of the master's, we will start looking at, for example, evidence that learning is indeed possible. And this is a little bit theoretical, but it also informs a lot of the practical rules. So it's really important to understand this. Then we start looking at, for example, object tracking using deep learning algorithms, exploring NLP with and without deep learning. And I've already mentioned it, but I think it's worth mentioning again, because students always comment on this aspect very positively. We look at the ethics perspective of AI, and we look at this code of conduct for the AI engineer. Okay, if this sounds of interest to you, then of course the next question would be, how do I apply? But the good news here is that if you work in the private or commercial semi-state organization in Ireland, you can get funding from Skillnet, ICT Skillnet. So there's the ICT Skillnet route. As part of this, you will do the certificate in AI, and over here it says mandatory, and mandatory always sounds a little bit bad, but it's actually very positive, because like I said, this allows you to get a taster of the program. It allows you to do these 2 modules, get some basic knowledge, assess whether doing this master's is for you or not. And if it's not, you can at that stage gracefully leave the program with a certificate in AI in your back pocket, or you can continue on to the program. So then you get the choice to join the master's in the same spring of year 1, so there's no delay. And there is grant aid available from Skillnet, roughly to the tune of 20%. So if you're interested in this, I would suggest that you contact Skillnet as soon as possible at info@ictskillnet.ie. If you do not belong to one of these organizations, you can still apply to the program, but then there's a direct MSc route, which is directly, or the application is directly to UL. And the important to say is that the application deadline is Monday, July the 19th. So if you are interested, please contact Skillnet as soon as possible to get the application process on the way. Okay, and there are two more links over here, a link for Skillnet and a link for UL as well, where you will find some more information on the program. And I will leave these links up on my last slide, where all I need to do is thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pep. If anyone has any questions on the master's program in the University of Limerick, please input your questions into the chat box, and after the next presentation, we will be taking questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Professor Barry O'Sullivan. Barry is a principal investigator in the Confirm Centre. He is also part of the School of Computer Science and IT in the University of College Cork. He's also the director of the SFI Centre for Research Training in Artificial Intelligence. Barry's part of the expert group for Future Skills Needs. He's also part of the National Research Ethics Committee for Medical Devices. And he's also advisor to the European Commission Joint Research Centre. So we're delighted to have Barry here today joining us. He's definitely an expert in this field. So Barry, without further ado, I will hand you over to his presentation, and please let's keep the questions till after his presentation.
Great, thanks Sylvia. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and hopefully the slides look reasonable on the screen. So it's a great honor to be here today, and it's great to hear Pepijn giving a great summary of the master's program in UL. I'm a UL graduate myself, so it's always great to see what's going on there. So over the last number of years, I've been doing a variety of things. A lot of my work has been on policy making in relation to AI, and also, there's a few things on the slides that there's a few activities that are not on the slides. So I'm doing a lot of work on diplomacy related to AI around weapon systems, military applications of AI. The work I'm doing at Europol is interesting. It's on using AI to essentially find lost children, which I'm not happy to talk about, but I'm certainly happy to answer questions about. So without further ado, I suppose Ireland has a great reputation in AI, and we can claim that Ireland has a strong AI connection. George Boole was the first professor of maths at UCC, wrote the laws of thought while he was here. You might be surprised to learn that Turing has an Irish connection. In fact, he's got more of a Midwest connection than he has a Cork connection. His mother was from County Clare. She was from County Tipperary. She grew up in County Clare, and his parents were actually married in Dublin. John McCarthy, who is really the founder of the field in terms of giving it a name, his father was an immigrant from Cahersiveen, and Geoffrey Hinton might be a surprise for some of you, but Geoffrey Hinton's great-great-grandfather was actually George Boole. So there's some little bit of Ireland in everything, and maybe I go so far as to say a lot of Munster actually in artificial intelligence. Of course, AI has been talked about for a very long time. This is actually a little snippet from a letter that was written to George Boole's wife after Boole passed away. It recounts a meeting between George Boole and Charles Babbage, I suppose the father of the computer, that took place in 1851, where they spoke about thinking machines, bringing together Boole's work on the automation of reasoning and Babbage's difference engine. Of course, the very first reference to artificial intelligence was in 1955 when John McCarthy and Minsky and others wrote the Dartmouth conference proposal. And in that proposal, they set out to solve artificial intelligence over 12 weeks with a carefully selected group of scientists. Now, the bad news is, or the good news, depending on which way you want to look at it, is that we're still at least 12 weeks away from artificial intelligence. But what's interesting is that when you look at the proposal, and this is the first page of the proposal, many of the things that we talk about today were envisaged in that proposal. So, for example, we heard earlier about the evolution of neural networks. So, neural networks were being studied by Marvin Minsky way back in 1955, in fact. Of course, the reason we talk about AI so much is because deep learning has had such a massive impact on on the field. And I suppose I put this slide up because it's important to realize that the greatest advances in artificial intelligence have happened through cooperation between academic institutions and industry. So each of the 3 Turing Award winners, Jan LeCun, Yoshua Bengio, and Jeff Hinton, all have part-time affiliations at universities and part-time affiliations in industry, in industry company, and I've listed those here. Of course, AI is everywhere. I think there's obviously, some early work on AI, and maybe to some extent today, game playing is still was one of the early benchmarks. And the reason for that, of course, is that many games like checkers and chess, they're full information games. You see everything, you see the full state of the world in front of you. Maybe more interestingly, recently the Liberatis Texas Hold'em system has beaten essentially all Texas Hold'em experts worth their salt at this point. And that's interesting because that is not a perfect information game, and there's a lot of bluffing that has to be done. And it's very interesting that Liberatis was able to do that. But I suppose we shouldn't get carried away about artificial intelligence either. Like I eat, sleep, and breathe AI, but I'm under no illusions. This idea that we're at an AI revolution is only very partly true. Because you take Liberatis for a moment. The Liberatis system consumes more power than, well, I think Liberatis, when it was running in Las Vegas for about 3 weeks, it consumed about $50 million worth of electricity. Playing against 21-year-old guys whose brains were consuming about 15 watts of power. So we're not comparing like with like. Yes, AlphaGo did beat Lee Sedol at Go, but it had been trained on about 5,000 lifetimes worth of Go. If in those lifetimes, players were playing all day, every day at the speed of a supercomputer, which of course is not true either. So we need to be very, very careful. We certainly have the illusion of intelligence, and certainly, we've automated certain tasks very productively, and that's interesting. But we also shouldn't get carried away. In terms of manufacturing, this is a snippet from a review we did for the European Commission some time ago, and it just sort of shows where adoption in AI is in the industries. And you see manufacturing, about 47% of European manufacturing companies use at least one AI technology. It's one of the highest areas. Education is an extremely high area. IT, of course, is probably the biggest area, but manufacturing is certainly the top 3. But it falls off very quickly when you look at the number of companies who have multiple uses of AI, and that actually is very stark in Ireland. So while Ireland is one of the leading countries in terms of organizations that have one line of business that uses AI, we actually fall very, very quickly to the bottom when you look at the number of companies that have multiple lines of business in AI. One of the projects I've been involved in at the Joint Research Centre is an initiative called AI Watch, which is essentially a set of dashboards and analyses on the adoption of AI, the uptake of AI, how people are using it, where it's having the greatest impact. And we created this dashboard, which allows one to explore the world of AI. I suppose particularly you can do things, I don't expect you to sort of absorb all of these slides, but just to give you a sense of what's going on. You can see the number of organizations that are working in these areas. We are particularly interested in a small number of areas. You can see manufacturing is up there on the top right-hand side. The dark green stack, and it's quite large, and particularly in China. There's huge amounts of work being done in China and South Korea, and Japan using AI. But of course, and you can also break this out in terms of where is the innovation, where's the patenting been done. Is it government institutions, is it research centers that are doing this kind of work? But I suppose if you look at Ireland, which I think is what we're really interested in, how are we doing? And I suppose I'm just going to very quickly give you some statistics from the AI Watch system that looks at thematic areas like AI services, computer vision, connected autonomous vehicles, machine learning, natural language processing, and robotics and automation. And I suppose in the context of manufacturing, computer vision and robotics and automation are probably the ones that we're most interested in here, maybe also AI services. And I suppose if we were to compare ourselves against, some of the AI manufacturing powerhouses in Europe, so for example, the UK, Germany, France, and Italy, the question is, well, how do we stack up and how do we compare? Well, first of all, if you look across the different areas, you'll find that Ireland is significantly ahead of even that group of countries on things like computer vision, where you can see up there in the top center of the slide that Ireland is really far ahead of what's going on in the UK and France and Italy and Germany. If you look at what's happening in AI services, we're certainly holding our own as we are in robotics and automation. And I think this is very, very good news for manufacturing. It shows that the sector is very strong. And I suppose the other dimension to look at is in those areas, where is the work being done? So is it in the private sector? Is it in the public sector? And not only is European Commission's strategy for AI very much around incentivizing the private sector. If you look at the statistics, you find that indeed it is the private sector where most of the work is being done, most of the innovation has been done in these areas. Of course, the research has been done in universities, but the real turning the research results into products has been done by industry. So earlier there was a mention of ethics and so on, and I think it's very important to think about these things for obviously because they're important, but also because they inform European policy and regulation very, very strongly. So about 3 years ago, the European Commission established a high-level expert group for AI. I was very fortunate and honoured to be appointed vice chair of that group, supporting Pekka Pitula, the former president of Nokia Mobile Phones, in fact, former president of Nokia, who chaired the group. And basically, we did a number of things. We produced the ethics guidelines of trustworthy AI for Europe, which is now official European policy. We developed a set of policy investment recommendations, which again are now part of official policy. And we developed assessment lists and evaluation tools with the Commission, one which I point to here, which we host on a server at my research group. I suppose just to give a sense of where the regulation comes from, I just want to quickly take you through the work of the high-level expert group and what happened to it. So basically, what is trustworthy AI? Well, trustworthy AI is AI that is lawful, ethical, and robust. So lawful means obviously that it is consistent with all the various legal requirements. It's ethical in that it's consistent with a number of ethical principles, and it is technically and environmentally robust. And we identified 7 key requirements that AI systems should have. In such a short presentation, we won't have enough time to go into these in detail, but you can find them in the ethics guidelines documents. But there are things like protecting human agency, ensuring there's transparency, ensuring that diversity is promoted, that there's minimum discrimination, and that there's fairness. And indeed, if you look at these through the lens of personal data, you find that the GDPR is a classic example of such a piece of legislation. Now, out of this, in November of 2019, when Ursula von der Leyen became the European Commission president, she promised that in her first 100 days of office that she would bring in a regulatory structure for AI. Now, of course, I think we all know that you can't do that in Europe, but what she did do is she published a white paper on AI. And that white paper sort of set out a vision for AI in Europe, which ultimately led to the proposed AI Act, which was the proposal was published in April of this year. If you Google any of these phrases here on the slide, you'll find the text of the AI Act, and you should be engaging in this process because this is going to be quite an influential piece of legislation. I should add that the high-level expert group has no role to play in the regulation. And in fact, I think the consensus amongst the high-level expert group was that additional regulation was not necessary, but the Commission has proceeded nonetheless. At the same time, it published a coordinated plan for AI for Europe, the Coordinated Plan on AI 2021 Review, which again is an extremely important document to read if you're interested in where policy and funding and so on is going to come from in Europe. So what is the regulation all about? Well, basically, it articulates a risk-based approach to regulation. So the higher the risk of an AI system, the greater the regulatory, the strength of the regulation. And the proposed regulation envisages 4 levels of risk. So unacceptable risk, so things that are literally banned. And so these are things like indiscriminate social scoring, certain types of subliminal manipulation, and so on. There are systems that come with no risk at all. So there's no those at the bottom of the pyramid. These have no. It is envisaged that there's no additional requirement around those. And then there's 2 levels in the center. Those that are high risk and those that are sort of medium risk. And the regulation is specifically addressing issues related to high risk applications. And risk here means risk to the fundamental rights of individuals or the risk to well-being and safety. And so there are a number of things that are called out there. So for example, in terms of bans, so the very, very highest level, subliminal manipulation, exploitation of children or mentally disabled, general purpose social scoring, remote biometric identification for law enforcement purposes in publicly accessible spaces. These under the regulation would all become illegal in Europe. But the question is, what happens with these orange and yellow levels? And this is the level that that people need to watch very closely. There is a list in the regulation about what constitutes high-risk applications, and there's a lot of debate and discussion about those at the moment. This is not a regulation that is in effect, of course. It has to go through the Council and the Parliament. And there is an opportunity for you to respond to it, and I think to react to it, and I think you very much should do that. If you're interested in understanding how you can do that, I'd be very happy to talk to you. I spend quite a lot of my time in the Brussels sort of environment, as I mentioned at the very beginning. Pepijn, just very quickly, Pepijn mentioned education. Education is absolutely critically important. And that's why the master's program at UL is so important nationally. An initiative that we have undertaken is to run the Elements of AI. It's a free online course for anybody in Ireland to take. You can, if you're interested in it, just go to elementsofai.com/IE. If you take the /IE version, then you will be supported by some people in my group in terms of the learning process. We're hoping for 50,000 completions in Ireland. When you complete, you get a little certificate from the Elements AI, including ourselves. It's, well, it might be worth hanging on the wall or something. Other initiatives, obviously, the Centre for Research Training on Artificial Intelligence, which of course, University of Limerick is a core partner in, is another way of engaging if you wish to do PhD studies, or if you're a company who wishes to avail of PhD expertise, you can come and talk to us. We'd be very happy to speak to you. Currently, there's a skills activity going on in relation to what skills does Ireland need in terms of AI. That's the expert group and future skills needs. So please watch out for that and engage as you feel appropriate. On the other regulatory front, obviously, this last month the medical device regulation came into effect, and as a consequence, Ireland was required to establish a national approach to research ethics committees, specifically in relation to medical devices. And so that our committee has met a few times. So if you're involved in medical devices interpreted broadly, you may be talking to us at some point, and we look forward to that. And of course, in the next week or so, I believe the National AI Strategy will be published. And obviously, we wait for that with bated breath. I suppose just my final slide. One of the concerns I have about what's going on in Ireland is that there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence from a lot of different sectors, from a lot of different organizations, and there isn't a single dedicated office in government for dealing with AI-related issues. So setting strategies, implementing the strategies, ensuring that the necessary incentives and supports are there for industry. And this is why I think we need to have a dedicated government office for artificial intelligence, very much modeled on the UK Office for Artificial Intelligence, which is probably the leading one in the world. So, sincere thanks to everybody for the invitation, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions, and handing it back to Sylvia. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Thank you very much. I think Mark has got a few questions in the Mark for Barry and for Pep.
Yes, thank you, Barry, and thank you, Pep. Pep, if I start with yourself, tell us a little bit about the benefits of the course being online and how students interacted in that way.
Well, I should probably start by saying that we have a lot of the students of the program, both past and present, on this call. And thank you very much all for joining. And of course, they would be best positioned to answer these questions. But from our perspective, we see that because everything is online, it really allows people who are in full-time employment to combine this master's program with their current work. It's tough, it's hard work, but then again, it is a master's. But what we also see is that people are almost immediately able to apply what they learn in the masters in their job. So there is a direct benefit.
And we're talking, and Barry talked about the learning and the importance of the future of learning. Tell us where you see the future of learning going out, because I really noticed the facilitator approach you took.
I think the future of learning, Mark, it's twofold. I think from the perspective of universities, and if we're looking at these types of online programs, the future of learning is very much going towards the approach that we're using, where as a student, you're not in a lecture hall, not in a virtual lecture hall either. It's not about listening to lectures. It's about doing. It's about engaging with the subjects, getting the right materials, getting the right supports. But apart from that, I think where the future of learning is lifelong learning. And lifelong learning means that it's not necessarily always going to be a master's program. It can also be shorter snippets than master's programs.
Dr. Barry, could you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges to companies starting off on their AI journey, and maybe some advice from the different industries that you've engaged with? And I know later on we'll have the panelists talking about their experience, but it'd be great to get some of your thoughts. I think you're on mute, Dr. Barry.
Yes, rookie mistake. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. So I suppose at the very outset, there's understanding enough about AI to determine whether or not it is important to you, so that it is an important technology to use in your particular setting. So, why are you using it at all, or why are you thinking about using AI? And a bad reason to use AI is just so that you can say you're using AI, obviously. After that, I think it comes the big challenge is skills. So having people who have the right knowledge to apply the technology safely. And so that's why, master's programs like the one that I've discussed earlier on is so important. If one of the difficulties with AI is that systems are becoming almost commodities now. And so, you take some data, you apply a machine learning method and you get a clustering, or you get a classification, but is that number, is that meaningful at all? How do you know what a good result looks like? And so anybody can produce the result, but it takes skill to understand if the result is an appropriate one. Obviously, data is a challenge. So where the data comes from, I suppose understanding what I call dark data, so data that is excluded or that we don't think about. So those sorts of issues. And of course, coming down the line, there will be challenges around it, like regulatory issues. So if this regulatory thing does come into effect, then being compliant with that is going to be a challenge. But I think the basic thing is awareness and understanding. Do I need to use it? Do I have, what are the alternatives if I don't use it? Because at the end of the day, in some sense, artificial intelligence is another programming technique. We're not talking about Terminator robots here. We're not talking about artificial general intelligences. We're talking about, machine learning methods for classification and regression and optimization and all these sorts of things, which are, when you look at them in detail, start to sound a little boring, but they're highly technical, and we need to understand how to use them correctly. Thanks.
So the importance of understanding the problem you're trying to solve, having accessibility to data, or making sure you're cleaning up the dirty data, and being careful and you're having an ethical approach to how actually you're utilizing the data. Because as you said, there's no point in utilizing AI unless there's a simpler solution to actually apply and
possibly.
Yeah. To do that. So the problem definition is really good. And probably, Barry, just a question to yourself as well, in terms of the future of learning and how you see that evolving over the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, like I think we do need to look at the whole question of skill demands and skill delivery very, very closely. Not everybody's going to do a PhD or a master's in artificial intelligence. You know, we need to get to the point where, you know, the ordinary person on the street has an awareness of what AI is all about and what the consequences are and what the risks are of using it. So there really needs to be a very broad strategy around, you know, almost like we had with IT. You know, there was the European computer driving license a few years ago. I think we kind of need a European AI driver's license or understanding license of some sort. You know, these basic skills, just to make sure that people know what AI is and what AI isn't. I'm sure Pep, well, I'm not sure if Pep feels the same way, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does, that the number of times that I'm listening to people talking about AI and I'm screaming at the screen, that is not what AI is all about, is very, very high. So I think also being able to get to the level where people can critique what they're hearing as something that's real or not is very important. I'll give you an example. I read a headline about 2 months ago that talked about a diagnostic test that had 100% accuracy with some tiny data set. Now, you know, you don't need to read very far to know that either the headline was wrong or the work is rubbish. But I saw that a lot of people were actually pointing to this in social media circles, particularly on LinkedIn, and that surprised me. You know, so I think we do need to really it's okay not to know stuff. So I think we need to take we need to start approaching the whole training and education and awareness building from the ground up, and everybody from, you know, from school kids to the ordinary person in the street, right up to the PhD expert. But the big challenge is going to be ultimately getting this technology into industry and out there in the real world. You know, the various waves that we've had, Pep gave a great summary of them. You know, will we see a fourth AI winter? Quite possibly. So we need to think very carefully about what's going on here before before it's somewhat too late or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Well, for everybody on here, I hope we don't, because we'll be in trouble. Well, I will be. So, I hope we'll be okay. So thank you again to Dr. Barry and Dr. Pep for your insights today. Very, very helpful indeed. So I had the pleasure of interviewing, as I mentioned, Dr. Pepijn van de Ven, and we got to hear about the part-time master's course, and also I interviewed 3 students of the course, and it was great insights on the podcast. And you can find that on aiireland.ie or any podcast platform of your choice. And today we're delighted to say that we have got some students, past and present, on today's panel session, and they're going to give us a little bit of an overview about what it's like, what factors to contribute from taking the course, what insights they've learned, and what they're actually looking to do to put that into practice. And what I'd like to do is give a brief overview about some of our guests today. Our first is Mariana Bokta. Second is Erin Hugh, and the third is Mark Boyle. My apologies, Mariana and Erin, if I've messed up your name. I'm sure you'll let me know later on, so I'll keep it on first name terms for messing up your surname. Erin is a second-year student on the program. He's a technical product manager at Indeed.com. And Mariana is a first-year student on the program, IT sourcing manager. And we had Mark Boyle, who's an innovation manager at Johnson & Johnson. He graduated in 2020 from the AI Master's Program. So firstly, I'd like to welcome you very much to the panel session today. It's great to actually have you on today's session. If I started off, if it's okay by you, Mariana, and I was to actually ask you a little bit about your background and what the factors that contributed to you actually taking the course.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, guys. So as mentioned, I work as IT sourcing manager. So basically when you need an external solution, IT software or something, because mostly company would have, something in there like the core activity, but you would always interact with external vendors. So I had privilege to see a lot of AI solutions being integrated in the network, and I've seen, from business perspective, from proof of concept to actually to enterprise agreement to scaling. And I understood the value, where it's coming from, return on investment, because when you buy something, you have to understand what the value is out. But I was lacking somehow, the technical, the algorithm. I wanted to go deeper to understand, how actually the solution itself is working, because this is how you can extract the most value. And having a good mathematical background, I decided that master in AI is exactly what I'm looking for.
And tell us about some of the insights you've taken away so far.
So I'm still, learning. I'm a year one student, and from inside perspective, Pep mentioned it very well that you have a certificate stage, and I think it's a great design, because on a certificate stage you have an introduction in AI, introduction and deep learning, and for me it was kind of that aha moment, because when I saw the deep learning is actually, and Dr. Barry mentioned, that we will hear a lot, for example, in like image recognition, and it's kind of magic for the ordinary people. But when you go deep and see exactly, how actually, you create the layers, from computer perspective, you can actually to recognize the image. It was like the great point. And I said, yeah, I want to know more. And Pep mentioned it actually as well in regards with ethics. So in regards with insights, yeah, the ethics is a separate model. And I think it was something unexpected. So yeah, we all know about ethics, about, the importance of this area. But when you go deep and you actually, understand all the details, it's a very, very interesting and very advisable for each of us to consider.
Thank you, Mariana. Erin, could I ask, get your little bit of thoughts working in Indeed and some of your background and what have been some insights you've gathered so far?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Great to be here, guys. So yeah, my name's Aaron. I'm a tech PM with Indeed.com. It's a big job recruitment technology company. How this kind of came about for myself, I was kind of doing growth marketing with Indeed, just trying to get more users onto the platform using particular products. And as I started working more with developers, and working with some of the other parts of Indeed that were deploying kind of data science and machine learning, I just got so interested in these solutions. And as Mariana kind of described, some of it was a bit magic. So I did have a bit of a background in web development. So I was familiar with kind of like building things, but the whole scope of machine learning and AI was totally new to me. And I just wanted to know how this stuff worked. So that's what really piqued my interest. And me as a PM, I just wanted to be more impactful. So I wanted to understand and know how to deploy the tools to create value for customers. So that's what really brought me to the Masters. And, I'm close to the end of the process. I've learned a tremendous amount. And I think the most insightful things I got from not just the course material, I got the most out of it from the other people that were in my cohort, in my groups, in the activity blocks that we're going through every 2 weeks that Pep kind of mentioned. Kind of working on a problem with a real diverse set of individuals and seeing the kinds of solutions they came up with, and then figuring out, what could I incorporate, what could they incorporate into their solution. So kind of working in this like open source way of solving this problem, I got to see so many things that I would not have come up with. So that kind of kept me motivated, knowing that there's a lot of creative solutions to these, I guess, problems. You know, it's. I know it might seem like just raw software engineering, but there's some creativity in it too, and that makes it really pretty unique.
So, Erin, for people that want to take the next step, but they're working like you're working, they're probably, may have family, kids, but they want to take the next step, but they're hesitant because they're just concerned about the workload. How have you managed it?
Yeah, I won't say it's been easy. It's been, a huge challenge doing full-time work, doing a master's, kids, COVID as well. But what I think kept us moving was the way it's totally online. And even when COVID happened, it didn't slow down the group's like learning speed because it was already planned out. We kind of knew when things had to be delivered. There was some flexibility in it. So the kind of built-in flexibility of when things need to be delivered, the, I guess, compassion with the course and module directors allowed us to give us some leeway depending on our individual circumstances. That kind of allowed us to just keep going with it. In preparation for it, I think, don't be afraid about with programming. I think I was a little bit, and you just really need to believe and know that you can learn it. And there's a tremendous amount of resources out there. You just kind of need to ask for help, and you can get it done. I'm amazed. I've reached this point, but it feels amazing to actually have kind of gotten to the stage with the whole program.
Erin, thank you very much for that. You're inspiring me to actually take it as well. So really, really good job there. I really appreciate your thoughts. Mark, if we tag you into the conversation as well, it'd be great to get a little bit of an overview about yourself. I know you're an innovation manager at Johnson & Johnson, and you've graduated in 2020 from the AI Masters program. Maybe a little bit of an overview about your background, maybe some insights you've taken from the course so far. And then my final question would be advice to other people who are going to start on this journey. Not sure if I can quite hear your audio there, Mark. I'm not sure if it's coming up okay.
Sorry, can you hear me now okay?
Yes, hear perfect.
Yeah,
now,
apologies, I was dropped out. Sorry, could you repeat the question there 1 second?
Yeah, so Mark, I was asking you a brief overview about your background and what was your considerations in actually taking the course in the first place.
Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward for me in that my background, I'll just kind of let you know, I'm a mechanical engineer as an undergraduate, and then I did my PhD in multi-physics simulation, which now is called digital twins. So that's very much on one end of the mathematical spectrum with respect to deterministic mathematics and outcomes. And really what interested me was with respect to the more kind of statistical end of, or kind of like a probabilistic outcome with respect to the answers we were getting from artificial intelligence solutions. And my role within J&J, I'd seen a lot of different solution providers come into the business and try to solve problems with artificial intelligence, and they're really, really world-class data scientists, and their success rate was really not fantastic. It kind of mirrored basically what the industry had been reporting with respect to like anywhere between 75 and 85% of projects really just didn't meet the expectations. So I thought that look, we really need to understand the fundamental sciences and the principles around AI, and that's why the course was really a good setup for me with respect to that what Pep had said with respect to that continuous learning. So as with everything, all of our skills and education has a half-life, and really to understand, to go back in and to really develop that skill with AI was really a good opportunity, and to really aligns with that kind of the modern, what we call like the learning or the agile learning manifesto, and linking earning to learning and learning to earning, in that kind of cyclical route. So yeah, so that's really what the motivation was.
Have you kind of taken away any key insights, and from those insights, have you been able to put anything into practice, the applications of it?
Yeah, definitely. What I would say is that the course in itself really reframed my thinking with respect to artificial intelligence, not just the course content itself, but also the cohort of people that I was involved in. So I think that, you know, there were some of the best people that were trying to develop AI solutions and working on AI projects across Ireland, and maybe that was fortuitous that I was in the first cohort, that there was a bit of a reservoir of talent that was looking for that, you know, that journey on academically with respect to AI. But to answer your question specifically, I went into it to solve a problem with respect to applying computer vision, and there was various different rules-based methods that had evolved, you know, within my employer, and they were really at the avant-garde of that rules-based methods and developed them over a course of 20 years. And really then they were trying to investigate, is the AI solution, or, you know, the convolutional neural network, you know, solutions really going to give us to a next level of performance? And really, the short answer was yes, and we were able to apply that and see, you know, a big benefit to that. But what I mean by reframing, you know, what my thought was I had a very well poised problem and a very good data set. It was really the application about, you know, applying the skills I had in the course to have that outcome. I was able to do that. That was fantastic. But beyond that, I think that the course really took me through, or gave me the opportunity to put the framework right. So when you think about it, you can learn really two things in many different disciplines with respect to principles and methodologies. And I think that the course does a good job on both. You really start to understand the principles of applying the artificial intelligence technology in many of its facets, but also you get to learn many of the leading edge methodologies for that. And even the time I was on the course, I seen it evolve, you know, dynamically in the period of time I was involved in the course. So that was really good. But really, to step through the things that I learned was really, I can apply to any ML project going forward, or AI project, is really the framing of the business and the data understanding, looking at data preparation, the modeling, the evaluation, the deployment, the monitoring, and the maintenance. So really end to end. So it's really going beyond just, you know, saying here's the performance of the AI solution, you know, and having a thesis, you know, put on the wall or put on the shelf. Really to see that really being used in industry was really the metric of success.
And the reality is for an awful lot of us who have gone to further education, a lot of the times our theses don't get used. But I think you've gone in with the mindset of, you know, I'm going to take this opportunity and apply it in my everyday work and actually look to have a return from that, which is fantastic. How have you gone back to your organization and try to win the hearts and minds of people to kind of help them on the journey? Because part of the challenge within some of the projects when you're applying AI in industry is that change management piece and kind of getting people on the journey to underpin a new project.
Yeah, I think that I was very lucky, right, in that I had an employer that had, you know, a digital strategy, who was really interested in the technology before I was engaged in this project. So there was a will and intent to look into this to see if it could really provide a solution and essentially allow the business to perform better. And they have ethical frameworks, and, you know, Johnson & Johnson, you know, have those in place already before, you know, I came to the table with my AI solution. But what I would say is that after that, I would say the big change in terms of adoption of AI and my personal journey through my career is really the fidelity and the reframing of the questions around AI has really leveled up with respect to even looking at, you know, beyond just the performance of the AI solution, like really understanding the explainability of the AI solution. That's what we're able to layer into the project as well, with respect to, you know, understanding, seeing what the AI or the convolutional neural network is saying with class activation maps, or looking to augment decision making with, you know, various different clustering mechanisms. So it was really the democratization of that additional cognitive, you know, augmented decision making that was really the big win within the adoption of that project. But then going beyond that, we're looking even at you know, how do you know, apply this within a regulated industry. And then we're working with you know, various different groups across the world with respect to the American Association of Mechanical Engineers and their verification and validation framework, and looking how do we leverage such learnings, you know, and digital evidence with respect to, you know, verification and validation, and working with the FDA and those you know, regulatory bodies to understand how can we really you know, enhance the process of essentially, you know, using that cognitive ability now in a more advanced way. Yeah. And then for my personal career, I think it's, you know, in the short space of time, it has been, you know, beneficial to me, in that I've been asked, to be now leading conversations around the social technical aspects of adopting these technologies, various different parts of the organization. So yeah, so it's been a positive.
Mark, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Erin, your role as product manager within Indeed, you're taking the customer problems or potential customer problems that you see down the line and then working with the technical team or team of data scientists to come up with solutions or put them into production. What does that look like in your organization?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways you can collect information about your users, right? For Indeed, we kind of have two sides of the marketplace. There's the job seekers, we try to help get them jobs. As the employers, we try to get them suitable candidates. So it's quite diverse in terms of like the information collecting process. So it's like quantitative and qualitative. So you can look at metrics and behavior information, but we also try to reach out and speak to job seekers directly to see how they're experiencing their job search, speak to employers directly. And that information kind of gets aggregated to almost like a product manager level where we kind of assess, what are the biggest pain points we need to solve. So that's how we kind of ingest it. Something I guess more recently that's come up is I work on a particular product called the Indeed hiring platform. So it's Indeed's virtual interviewing tool set. So it's like a video call where you can talk with candidates and do that first initial call with them. So there's a particular like set of employers that this is really suitable for. So it's like people hiring for remote, people hiring for jobs where you typically need to do one or a couple video interviews before you actually decide if somebody's suitable or not. So not all employers are really a good fit, but to discover which employers the sales team should really focus on and speak to and try to sell this new product was a bit of a challenge. So what some of the data science team did was they put together a pretty comprehensive way using a variational autoencoder to then build out a clustering model that then would kind of give you like a recommendation of what kinds of employers that are not currently using the system would use the system. So it really generated a really elegant, I guess, lead list for the sales teams. And I got to be part of the product managers that kind of oversee the data input into this and making sure that it actually lined up with our kind of customer base. So this is just one example of keeping an eye of the pulse of what an employer's problem might be, knowing a solution that we have, and using data science to figure out which customers would really be most suitable for this particular product.
Thank you, Erin. A final question to Marianne. Tell us a little bit about the advice you'd offer to a student going to take the course. I think there's a little bit of an issue on sound there, Marianne. I'm not sure if there's an audio issue. We may have lost Mariana there. I'll give a couple of seconds to see if Mariana could come back on to the call, see if the audio is okay. If not, what I might do is head over to Dr. Barry O'Sullivan for our next and final session. And what we could do is go back to Mariana and get Mariana's thoughts if we have time at the end so I'll just see how we're looking for that. Okay, I think what we will do is that. And Dr. Barry, I'm going to hand over to yourself, and you can.
Great, thanks, Mark.
And we have the next panel session.
Great, thank you very much. So so that was really great, and I think we have a very nice panel coming up. And it's an industry panel, and we have 3 members who I'd ask to turn on your cameras together so we can create a sort of around the fireside kind of feel. So, and we have in front of us today Laza Giborn, who's Commercial Director of Intelligent Optimization at Advanced Manufacturing Control Systems. So just to introduce Les, he's responsible for product management of ACMS, Transport Management System. He joined the company in April 2018 and is based in Copenhagen. He's 25 years experience in global software product teams developing B2B solutions exclusively delivered software as a service. At AMCS, he works for transport solutions for industries like waste and recycling, last mile, livestock, building materials, and downstream fuel distribution. And his and their speciality is automation and optimization of highly complex, high density route planning problems. So a problem very, very close to my own heart. We have so welcome. We have Mike Morrissey, who's Catalyst Director at ADI. Michael has been working in the area of exploiting silicon technology for advanced sensor development for about 25 years. He's the current Analog Devices Ireland Catalyst Director, with responsibility for accelerating their connection to customers through ecosystem partners to collaborate and further co-create innovative solutions. ADI Catalyst Europe is a customer collaboration hub with a growing global impact in areas of Industry 4.0, connectivity, automotive, and innovative business models. So welcome, Mike. And last but not least, we have Patrick O'Neill at Degree Synthesis, and he's a principal automation engineer with over 20 years experience working in automation, both in the semiconductor and medical devices industries. Patrick joined Degree in 2013 with, and was tasked to define the automation strategy and deliver modular scalable solutions while adhering to the key principles of Industry 4.0 and enabling a full connected data-rich environment. As part of the initial cohort, Patrick completed the MSc in AI in 2020 to the University of Limerick, which you have already heard about. So welcome, Patrick. And it's great to be with this group because, in fact, my first degree was in production management at the University of Limerick. So I used to do some automation a lot too. So welcome, everybody. And it's great to have you involved. Before we start, I would like to encourage the audience to put questions into the chat window. So stop doing your email and engage in this fine panel that we have here. And if questions do come into the Q&A, and if our panel members would like to answer them live, they can just click on answer live, but do feel free to just click and reply offline if you wish. So I suppose my first question to you all is, like, what is, in your view, the current state of AI manufacturing? So, like, what are you seeing? And, what's changed over the last, say, 8 or 10 years? So maybe, Leslie, shall I go to you first?
You can do that. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a great honor. So from my perspective, I've been working with software towards the transport industry, and especially then waste and recycling is the big one that we are working in with AMCS. Not as you saw on your own slide, it's not a very mature sector, but there's a whole industrialization piece going on, digitization piece going on waste and recycling industries worldwide, and they're maturing and becoming a lot more digitized and a lot more focused on software. And as a result of that, we run into plenty of questions on ML and AI and how to apply these technologies. And there is a level of buzzword going on in that industry, but we are definitely now seeing some real useful cases, and especially on transport safety, with dash cams, for example, having a camera monitoring the driver and trying to figure out if he's yawning, if he's blinking, if he's focusing on his cell phone rather than on the road. Yeah, so I think it's a late evolution in that industry, but it is definitely coming. And as everyone here has said, it's all about the adaptation. It's the usefulness of the technology and the pain points that it solves.
And just before we move on to Mike, why do you think it's a late innovation? Do you think there have been some obstacles, or is there a conservatism, or is it just that the data or the expertise wasn't there?
No, I think the industry in itself is going through change. So the industry itself is definitely centralizing. There's a lot of there's a lot of money coming into waste and recycling. Big companies buying up small actors. It's becoming more industrialized, and it's becoming more digitized. And I think as a result of that, that's why they are a little bit later to the game, because it wasn't very long ago that it was more of a moms and pops kind of business to collect waste and drive to the landfill or to the recycling center. But now it's becoming a business. Circular economy is driving that. Our climate situation is driving that. So that's why I think it's a little bit later.
Great, thank you. And over to you, so Mike, what do you think? So, like, where is AI manufacturing, and what has been happening over the last several years?
For me, Barry, when I look at AI in manufacturing currently, I suppose just to maybe step back, Analog Devices have two interests in it. One is in our manufacturing plants that we have. So we're a semiconductor manufacturer. So we have an interest in it from our own manufacturing plants, and we've a very large one, two here in Ireland and around the world. And we also have an interest in it from enabling technologies that we actually manufacture and produce and systemize, which maybe I know we'll be moving on to in a few minutes, why it's important for future factories. So that I'll be putting that separate view of it for Analog Devices on that one. But for the area of where it currently is in our manufacturing plants, it's very limited AI, and that can be down to regulation, which maybe I'll talk about in a few minutes, or what we can actually utilize it for. At the moment, I would say there's very few processes in our fabrication plants that we're using it for, which would be the ones I'd be intimately familiar with. I seen just a demonstration during the week of AI utilized for defect inspection, yield improvements. Obviously, every percentage we can improve gives overall product to our customers, which, as you know, semiconductor at this time is under exceptional pressure to deliver more product. So there was one use of it that a company we work with had built an AI enabled detection system that was able to improve their yield outputs very, very significantly by constantly learning the different defects, by taking it out of the operator's hands, by classifying them correctly. It's to the point, especially with shrinking geometries, where your noise and your signal is nearly identical. Now you need that artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to determine which is the actual signal and which is the noise, or a defect, as we call them. So that's a very powerful use of it that has been enabled, I would say, over the last year or two, and it's that's I think is a game changer in the industry. ADI as a company we would say we've been on a long journey of machine learning, starting in 1973 when we first started laser trimming our resistors that are in our precision converters. So we use that data that we collected, fed it back into the system, and then became a lot more efficient in laser trimming. So we constantly use that machine learning, I suppose, to improve our systems. And so we would say we've been doing it for a long time without knowing it, maybe, or calling it artificial intelligence and machine learning. And lately we've been producing products like condition-based monitoring. One in particular called AutoSense that listens to the environment and using AI and machine learning determines if your car is starting correctly, or if an industrial robot is making that wick, click, bang noise that it should make every time. So and it allows you to do predictive maintenance. So that's roughly to answer your first question. I hope that's
yeah, that's great. And like just before we move on to Patrick, do you get a sense that AI is overhyped? And like obviously, as you say, Analog has been doing these kinds of things for a long time, and just because people start talking about AI doesn't mean that people should use it. That's AI isn't an end in itself. But do you feel that there might be an element of overhyping around the technology?
Personally, I don't. I think this got huge scope. And especially if I talk about the future and the future factories, which I know you move on to soon, but I think it's got huge, powerful, and it will determine the. And I had an argument with an old boss who did think it was overhyped. So and he was a very smart guy and could read the room very well. So I was a bit nervous about saying, I don't think it is, and he thought it was. You know, we've done it, created automated lawnmowers and used it in very limited capacity. So he definitely felt there was potential, but we were hugely overhyped. Are we in a zone of overhype at the moment? Potentially, and we talk a lot about it. And I know earlier you mentioned about AlphaGo and some of the areas there, and maybe you cleared up. I did watch that Netflix when it was on Netflix, and you cleared up a lot of things in that for me actually that I didn't really like. But I think it has huge potential, and
Sure.
been working closely with a company in Shannon called Endalo, who's some very talented AI people there. And they've been using it in smoke sensors. They've been using it in detection for mapping out areas of the coast where it can autonomous. So and of course we know I was very close to, you know, and we all have been touched by cancer. It can be used in cervical cancer screening in AI. So I in a broader, I think it's hugely powerful. And in manufacturing, I think we're on the upward trend of the hype curve. We haven't hit the top of it yet, but we have to deliver. I do think it will be powerful. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So, Patrick, what about you? So, you know, what's your view on the current state of things, AI and manufacturing related, and you know what's been happening over the last few years?
I think one of the main things that's happening over the last few years, I think, is the digitalization of the manufacturing environment. Now, I'll admit we're very early in our journey in AI, but no, with the digitalization, we now have tools to allow us, you know, to create fully connected ecosystems, where cloud solutions are available to support, you know, big data. We all hear about big data now, and that takes a lot of effort. And big data also needs to make sure you have data that's contextualized correctly, so you can use it. This coupled with advancements in smart sensor technology, you know, has enabled real-time data streaming. We are no longer restrained by the limitations, say, of our control systems or our control platforms. We have an alternative source now for data. As a result, we now have access to these large volumes of data, which I think is key to the evolution of AI, allowing us to better understand and predict anomalies within our process to improve, say, quality, maintenance, and cost reduction.
Sure, very good. And you know, so and Mike made a number of references to future factories. So if I may go back to him for a moment. So, you know, like, what's your view of the importance of AI in the future factory and sort of, you know, where manufacturing is going next? So, and maybe I'll come to all of you on that one as well, just to get your view on the future. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. We've one of the reasons I mentioned Endalo is actually we were lucky enough to get a disruptive technology innovation fund secured on AI in smart factories of the future with Endalo and modular automation, actually based in Shannon as well. So we're on the next 3 years. We have to prove that AI is going to deliver it. That's why I have to say yes. I think it will. But in future factories, we think safety, when you consider it, it's going to be made more complex. Personalized manufacturing is going to fundamentally alter the factory processes, are planned, scheduled, controlled. You know, smart future factories, we feel they will seamlessly and automatically reconfigure the production environment. Customer demands are going to drive that. You know, whether you want some sort of personalized output or whether you want high volume, we feel it's going to become a very modular factory instead of the standard product lines that are there now. Manufacturing recipes will change. Transfer of product to different locations will be much more frequent. Robots will become more mobile and need to communicate with each other. So the factory will have to have a real-time digital footprint where machines and assets can be tracked. What we've seen is that it's estimated that only 5% of occupations consist of activities that are 100% automable in the factory. So there'll still be a huge requirement for people and robots to work together. So robotic systems, they need to be smarter. So when you look at, and one of the things that is gonna hold us back is safety regulations and procedures. So we need to prove that AI can pass the stringent safety regulations that are required for every sensor and for every movement you put into the factory. So we need to guarantee that, and that's part of what we're going to try to do. And we're going to try to facilitate those evolving requirements. I think in April 2019, and I think you might maybe refer to it earlier as well, Barry, you know, the expert group on the European Commission on AI presented, you know, AI has to be, you know, hit by the laws, ethical, it should be lawful, respecting all applicable laws, ethical, respecting ethical principles and values, and robust. So both from a technical perspective, while considering a social environment. So that was the text from it that I'm reading. But we feel definitely the robust, you know, we want to make it robust and trustworthy. So what we see happening is, as it's gone through its lifetime, is we'll create an AI-based motion classification technology to control the robot functions within a manufacturing environment, predominantly for safety applications. So keep people safe while carrying out critical functions. The technology will use machine learning. It'll infer human movements within a manufacturing environment and then enable more efficient hazard control of robots. And that could be typically, you know, heavy duty robots are cordoned off. That makes them expensive and cumbersome. And we want to now take away those enclosures where people can safely work with. We were on a customer call recently with one of our robot manufacturer, and one of the questions was, how does he, you know, his customers are driving him to make the floor bigger, so that people can access. And so you've got the safety guard, and then you've got, how can you remove that? And now how can you remove another 2 meters? So they're in the fact they're literally looking for meters of space, and sensors and AI will allow us to be able to make those robots and cobots and AMR systems work with humans. That's how we feel this is going to be disruptive in the future.
Yeah, so it's yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The you know, if you look at people like Andrew Ng, you know, one of the world authorities on machine learning, you know, his company Landing.ai, it's a manufacturing company, right? It's actually, when we wrote that phrasing, ethical, lawful, and robust, that was in the Sofitel on a Saturday morning in Place Jordan in Brussels, just after a pizza, if I remember rightly. Over to Patrick. So just on this one, you know, the future. So in terms of future factories in AI, what do you think is coming up? And then I'll go to then I'll go back to Leslie.
Yeah, with respect to future factories, I suppose we've already started to look at that. You know, we have a number of programs ongoing around digital twins, which, you know, supports AI. But I know when you introduced me, like, a lot of my work up to date now has been around modularity and scalability. So we've actually, you know, broken down the traditional manufacturing line, which is normally very rigid, you know, very fixed. Our latest lines now that have gone in are purely modular. We're actually working with a modular in Shannon as well. We've deployed AIVs to service those modules. Okay, so that's allowed us to build in 100% scalability into our factory. We've seen that now over the last number of months. We're able to bring in new assets, deploy them in the same area without affecting the validation of the current assets, which was key to us because we're not impacting on our supply chain, our supply line. We're actually adding to it and doing it without affecting the customer. So the scalability, the modularity, AI has a big part to play in that going forward for future factories.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And let's say, what are you saying from the point of view of, you know, the future factory and the role of AI? What are your predictions?
Yeah, so I would focus more on the transport segments of the equation, but we were seeing the same thing everywhere. It's the IoT is invading us with these sensors, and all of our customers are very interested in getting to understand fill degrees of containers and to understand traffic patterns and to understand certain behaviors on a truck itself in terms of brake pads and the status of the brake pad and how much fuel do I have left. I'm starting to use electrical vehicles, and so we're getting the big data wave is coming to us from these trucks that now are more data hubs than anything else. Sure. And the demand is there. We need to do something about this data. We need to be able to make decisions on these data. We need to be able to optimize maintenance schedules and driver accessibility, and when do we take a truck off traffic to review it or to charge it? When can we start using that electric truck again? So there's a ton of these requirements coming out of our customers, and volumes are just forcing us to automate the process. We have to make decisions, or we have to make machine-based decisions. So that's definitely what we're seeing in our world.
Well, what's interesting from an AI point of view is that sometimes scale helps. So there are certain algorithms that or certain problems, I suppose, in AI when you have very, very large instances. The smart heuristic does almost as good as the optimal technique, which is also interesting because we shouldn't be frightened of scale. I see there's a question from Conor McCarthy, the director of the Confirm Centre, in the chat, and I don't think we all have to answer this question, but maybe if I direct it at Mike, maybe. So Conor mentions that as far as he's aware, AI is not yet certifiable in control systems or manufacturing and production systems. And do you see this as a major reason for the slow uptake of AI in the sector? But obviously, any of the panelists can answer that. But maybe Mike, did you want to comment on that?
We do. Is Conor, and we do a lot of work with Confirm Centre, and definitely give him a shout out. We some of these SFI researchers on Hinchy here with us, so we do great work together. But we do see it as a problem. But it's not just in AI. Safety standards that is every sensor we release has to pass the safety standards, and we've got a team of people being led by Tom Meany in Analog Devices that is part of all the safety boards, part of the recommendations. He like you do, Barry, when you're writing about AI in Europe, he determines the regulations in that. He writes those procedures and what we need to do. He's part of that working group. So we're very embedded in making sure that what's achievable is reflected in the requirements, and we're very conscious in driving it forward. We do feel within about 3 years that we AI in, and that was the term of our proposal as well when we did the DTIF, that we will have, as Tom is progressing those safety standards throughout, we will have hit the required standards for AI to be sufficiently used in. But Conor is right. It would, if you try to do it tomorrow morning, apart from the defect system maybe that I mentioned earlier in robotics, right, you wouldn't be allowed. You just wouldn't have the certification for it to work. But that's not to stop us putting it into situations where we can test it and collect the data, and that's our first step, and then prove that these work together. So yes.
Okay. So thank you. I'm just conscious of time because I think the time has passed very, very quickly, and I really want to thank all three of our panelists for the very engaging and thoughtful contribution. So to Leslie from AMCS and Patrick from Dupuy and Mike from Analog Devices, great thanks for contributing to the panel. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm going to hand you back now to Mark.
I'd just like to say thank you very much again to everybody, Dr. Barry and Dr. Pepijn as well, and all our panelists today. I, for one, learned an awful lot from the conversations. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Confirm. It was very, very enjoyable on this co-hosting event. Sylvia, I might leave you for the last words.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I might just ask everyone just to turn on their camera just before 2 minutes before we finish up. So thank you very much. I hope everyone learned something from today's webinar. We wanted to give a good mix between academia and industry, so that's why we decided to have the two panel speakers. And also it's nice to get a good intake on the master's program as well, and from past and previous students, because I think you can learn a lot from a first-year student to a second-year student, and then also somebody that's actually completed the course. I hope we've answered some of the questions as well there in the chat box, and I know a few was answered privately as well. Thank you for Barry O'Sullivan to be our keynote speaker as well today, who's an expert in his field, and Dr. Pepijn as well from the master's program. Again, just to all the partners, Analog Devices, Dupuy, Advanced Manufacturing Control Systems, and obviously the University of Limerick as well. So with 1 minute to go, I'd like to thank everyone today, and we're right on schedule. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar.